Hi everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of your Tarot Course series brought to you by 1millionnights.com. In last week's episode we took a look at the tarot card bearing the symbolism of 5, the High Priest. So the major arcana which follows the High Priest is the Lovers, bearing the numerological symbolism of 6. Now this is one of the most versatile tarot cards, because even though it has a very suggestive name, the Lovers, which points to a partnership, a union of two elements, it can also be seen as an attraction where one element attracts the other. And if we add to it the numerological interpretation of 6, which is basically spirit manifested in matter, that union is complete and it forms something totally new. So we can take a look at the 6 as 3 plus 3. Two separate elements bearing an energy of fertility as in the 3, and they become complete as in 6. But the versatility of this card is given by the fact that attraction, love, two elements joining as one can mean so very many different things. And this is one of the cards which really depends on the reader, the personal philosophy of the reader, and in very many cases, the intuitive perception of the reader, because that is what's basically going to translate the message of the Lovers, what kind of partnership it is, what kind of union it is, if it's actually something exterior, or if that union, or if that meeting of two elements takes place inside of us. And of course, this is where the graphic representation of the card, as in the specific tarot deck we use, also makes a lot of difference, because the Lovers card has so very many different graphic representations. Now first of all, let us take a look at the astrological symbolism behind the Lovers card. Now the Lovers card is the sign of Gemini, one of the most adaptable, versatile, and naturally individualistic energies in the zodiac. So of course the tarot card bearing the symbolism has to adapt very Gemini-like qualities. Now the symbol, the astrological symbol of Gemini is the Roman 2. And this is one of the first hints that this is about a union, this is about a certain kind of duality. Because besides communication, besides the practicality of our mental spheres, the sign of Gemini also rules our interhuman connections, and naturally one of our most valuable and much needed interhuman connections, which basically makes society what it is today, is partnerships, romantic partnerships, marriage, and even sexual partnerships, because that is how our species procreates. And, especially in modern society, it doesn't need that much commitment, it just needs one single act and a new life is ultimately born out of it. But of course, let's take a look at its deeper meaning. Now, the sign of Gemini in Greek mythology is based on the legend of Castor and Pollux, the divine twins, where one of the twins was mortal and the other one was a god. And ultimately, Pollux, the immortal, the godlike twin, asked Zeus to be allowed to share his immortality with the mortal twin, Castor, and this is how they became a constellation, so they were cast on the starry sky. And even though this is just a legend, well, this represents the sacred union, because ultimately, a union represents a sacrifice of both sides. And basically, this legend of the Gemini, the legend of the twins, leads us to a very Jungian type of philosophy and interpretation behind this, where we can take the Lovers card as not romantic love, not partnership, not even interhuman connection, but basically our human selves and our higher selves and the connection of the two. So a part of us is basically just a divine spark, how the great universe, the cosmos, the creator, the great architect experiences itself through us, and the other part is our mortal shells, which is basically the vessel, and these two have to be in harmony in order for us to function. And naturally, when this divine union within the self functions in harmony, we have a happy life, we can embrace joy, and at the same time, we can overcome and accept hardships, challenges, crises, and all the bad stuff which life throws at us. Because when we are in a union, even if it's just union with the self or the higher self, life is not impossible and life is not defeating. Very many times the Lover's Tarot card actually speaks about just the self, our internal energies, a union of our internal elements. For example, our higher selves and our shadows have to collaborate, or the heart space, our feelings, our emotional world has to be in harmony, in collaboration, so to speak, with our mental spheres, with our thoughts. Our sexual desires have to be in harmony with our emotions, or it can be our mental spheres as in our highest principles. So the Gemini card always speaks about finding the balance between two extreme polarities. Now, of course, this also leads us to the philosophy according to which every single person who is one way or another in our sphere of awareness, as in basically our interhuman connections, is just a different kind of self with a different life, with a different body, with a different life story, with a different personality, embodying a totally different archetype, but perhaps the very source of existence inside is the same. We are just mirrors for each other. Or in much more modern terms, everything is just an interconnected quantum reality. So what happens to one particle, one element, one way or another is reflected or mirrored in another, regardless of where they are, how they are, who they are. So very many tarot readers, especially the modern ones, consider the Lover's card as a twin flame kind of connection. But of course this is kind of true, even if it take it in a very classic kind of way, because in the classic decks, for example the Rider-Waite deck, the Lover's card is depicted as a male and female, Adam and Eve, brought together and held together by the Archangel Raphael, so their divine union was basically written in their stars or orchestrated by the highest celestial forces, and that is basically quantum physics, just in a very classical take and approach. So yes, absolutely, the Lover's card does mean in very many cases a fated kind of connection, a fated kind of relationship, a union, meeting with someone who has to complete you one way or another, or someone who is, from a philosophical perspective, your twin. But of course, this doesn't necessarily have to be anything romantic. It can represent soulmate kind of connection, it can represent best friend, it can represent siblings, your brother, your sister, or someone who you hold as your brother and sister. Naturally, it can be business partnership, any kind of alliance where the relationship is very strong, it is very practical, it is part of each person's life story, and from a karmic perspective, it is not really optional, it is meant to be, because the union of the two elements, regardless of the nature, romance or a very practical job-wise, career-wise, business-wise, project-wise, has to give birth to something totally new. As in the numerological symbolism of 6, the spirit manifested in matter. That is how the spirit manifests, because one part is ethereal, immortal, as in Pollux, and the other one is very earthly, Castor, and when the two meet, a certain kind of equilibrium forms, and that equilibrium, that balance, allows it to exist in the world of matter. It still possesses a little bit of the divine quality, but also it's very earthly and practical. Now, of course, even when it comes to love, like true partnership, lovers is not a very romantic, emotionally packed card, because that is the Two of Cups. But the difference between the two is that the Two of Cups is very optional. It is just an emotional or psychological attraction to someone, but the union is not really guaranteed. It is just a blessing of Venus. Now, when it comes to the Lover's card, it has a very strong practical element because it also appeals to the mental sphere. So the union has to make perfect sense and has to be practical one way or another. May it be simply emotionally. When someone fulfills you emotionally in a way no one else can, or very practically, someone basically fills a need that you have in your life, or it can also be a karmic and fated relationship when everything ties together, when the quantum strings are super interconnected, everything ties you to that person. And there are certain tarot decks which actually highlight this need in a very beautiful and symbolic way, where they depict the Lover's card as the mythological episode when Perseus saves Andromeda. So basically it is a need. Andromeda is a maiden in need. She is going to be devoured by Cetus unless the hero on the winged Pegasus comes and saves her. So basically it is Andromeda's need that pulls Perseus into her life story. You may ask, what does Perseus get out of this? Well, this is where, if there isn't a big moment of crisis in someone else's life, you just cannot be a hero. And of course, this also depicts the fated nature of this relationship, and that they had to overcome a lot of challenges. For example, Perseus had to slay Medusa, a symbol of our shame, our guilt, our darkest and most envious and jealous self, in order for her blood to release Pegasus, which ultimately takes him to Andromeda. Another very important symbolism, that Gemini is two extremes, but they have to be in perfect harmony with each other. They have to find the middle way, the balance, because that is how they can operate in the physical world with great efficiency. Of course, balance means different things and different measures for different people. So it's not something absolute, it is not set in stone, but rather what balance and a balanced state means to you, it can only be found within. By experiencing life and ultimately experiencing both sides of the extremes, because without shadow, you cannot know what light is, and vice versa. So there is also that extreme side to the Lover's card. Now, of course, there is a totally different kind of interpretation and philosophy behind the Lover's card, because according to some authors, the Lovers is basically a rather positive and benevolent manifestation of the Devil card, because from a numerological perspective, the Devil also bears the symbolism of 6, as in 15, 5 plus 1 equals 6. And in very many tarot decks, the graphic representation of the Devil is very similar to the Lover's card, where instead of Raphael, we have the Devil chaining the two lovers to one another, which is the dark side of the lovers. Because when love is full of attachments, when love is full of strings, when love is full of obligations, duties, jealousy, all the negative emotions, then it is a very powerful and unhealthy attachment which basically enslaves us. But since the Lover's card is the more positive, the higher expression. Love and this relationship is made out of free will. You agree without being forced or tricked or manipulated by anyone. And this doesn't really contradict the karmic nature, because, the celestial forces are not going to unite you with your lover until you are ready. Of course, sometimes you get connected, this union takes place, but since none of the lovers basically are ready, they make mistakes or they're still immature, they cannot appreciate their love, fate separates them, and then after tens of years, they do realize that they were made for each other and their union gets perfected again, but this time for good. And yet, even if the lovers is the most positive representation of that union, let's say the devil card, it is still addictive. So free will is one way or another questionable, because yes, you agree to it, yes, you are filled with joy, happiness, love, and you appreciate this partnership so very much. But if we look at things from a very scientific and earthly manner, a state of love causes the brain to release certain kind of hormones or certain kind of substances which make us feel a certain kind of way, but that feeling is highly addictive. So, when it is permanent, when we basically live through that emotional state each and every day of our lives, if it suddenly stops, then we can go through a very painful withdrawal process. So this is why when fated lovers lose each other, it is a big, big tragedy, for it's not just a soul level pain, but it's also physical pain, because the body is in total disharmony, because it doesn't get that substance, the hormone anymore. And this basically leads us to the conclusion that love cannot be controlled, that love is always free, love has a mind of its own, and sometimes we just simply cannot understand it. Even though we are infinitely wise, even though we have all the life experience in the world, when our bodies are even triggered from a physical perspective, well then our wisdom, our emotional intelligence, our maturity is worth absolutely nothing, because we still are going to suffer if we lose love. And this isn't just about romantic love or love for a person. It can represent love for anything, an object, an activity, substances, etc. And why am I telling you all of this? Well, because sometimes the lover's card doesn't refer neither to the self, neither to any kind of person, but it actually shows that you're attracting something into your life, something which your unconscious mind needs to have in your reality. But of course, when this is the case, the lover's card is going to have very specific kind of clarifiers to it. For example, the moon card or the hermit card, the 6 of swords, or sometimes the 9 of swords, when you're attractive really, really bad and negative things. So now, after we took a look at the philosophy behind the lover's card, let's take a look at what it could mean in different situations within a reading. Well, first of all, in upright position, usually the way I take it, it represents an outer expression of the lover's card, as in either another person, regardless of their quality, regardless if it's romantic love or they fulfill a certain kind of position in our lives. If it's reversed, well, that speaks about either self-love or that it's an internal force that is going on within us. And usually the clarifiers tell us what the lovers truly mean. For example, lovers with the devil card represents a sexual attraction or a sexual connection. Lovers with the 3 of cups, for example, it can represent inspiration, friendship, a state of being, art, music, etc. Lovers with the 3 of coins, It can represent a colleague, a job offer, a lucrative activity, a hobby, something that you want to practically do. The Lovers and High Priest, or the Lovers and Seven of Swords, it can represent an official marriage, as in signing the papers. Lovers and Four of Wands, Lovers and Ten of Cups, it can represent that someone who you know and you're close to is gonna have a new relationship in their lives, or you're gonna be invited to a marriage, or someone in your family is going to get married or is going to form a stable relationship. Lovers and Two of Cups. Now this is very straightforward. It represents that you're gonna be in a romantic relationship in the very close future. Lovers and, for example, Eight of Cups reversed or Six of Cups. Someone from the past is returning in your life, maybe an ex-partner. Lovers and the Justice card, Lovers or the Justice reversed, can represent that in one of your relationship you need to get more equality, more mutuality. Maybe it is you who are tipping the balance, or it can be the other person, but either way it might suggest that there is going to be a need for greater equality. Now, of course, the Lovers combined with certain cards can have very negative connotations. For example, Lovers with the Three of Swords. Be careful because someone is going to break your heart. Lovers with the Five of Swords, Lovers with the Five of Cups can mean be very careful because you might be mistaking someone for a fated lover when they're just a toxic person. Lovers with the Hangman. It can represent that you're sacrificing way too much, or you're adapting a position of martyrdom. Lovers with, for example, the Two of Wands, or Lovers with the Judgment card, can represent that you're going to be a mediator between two lovers. Or the Lovers and an Eight of Wands, for example, can represent that you're going to be Cupid's agent and are going to connect two people, and they are going to form a stable relationship thanks to you. Of course, sometimes the Lovers card can also depict what another person loves. Especially when you ask a question of that nature. What does someone think? Or to reveal the mindset or the feelings of someone. Like the Lovers with the Nine of Coins can represent, well, that they love themselves and the way their lives are so much that they're not gonna invite or accept anyone else in their lives. The Lovers, for example, combined with the Devil card, it can say they love power, money, authority. So if you don't possess any of those, there's no way you can, become friends or the lover of that person. Lovers and the Nine of Swords can say that they're psychologically really, really unwell and they would not be ready for a new relationship. Lovers and Ten of Cups reversed may represent that they're still not over a divorce or an old relationship, so you have no chance. But of course, Lovers and the Ace of Wands, for example, or another positive one card like the Three of Wands, sometimes Two of Wands, can tell you, well, go for it, do everything that is in your power because you have very good chances. Or let's say Lovers and the Ace of Coins reversed or Devil reversed might tell you that psychologically everything is absolutely fine, but physically and sexually you're not gonna be compatible at all, because either you're not their type or there is gonna be no chemistry between you. Or the Lovers, Queen of Swords reversed, mentally or intellectually you're not compatible. Or Lovers with the Four of Coins reversed, well, their self-worth is either too low or way too high. But as I said at the beginning of this episode, the Lovers card is such a very versatile card that the very best idea is just to make up your own philosophy about it. Experiment with it. See how it plays out in your readings. See how it manifests in different positions and different combinations in your personal life. Or, if you're doing readings for other people, be sure to get their feedback of what the lovers potentially meant for them. Because very many times we can find that the tarot card that appears is actually very correct. It's just our interpretation or take on it might be a little bit off, so feedback always helps us. Well, thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and please stay tuned next week for the 8th episode, where we're going to take a look at the next card, the Chariot, bearing the numerological symbolism of 7. Everyone a blessed and magical day. Until next time, bye for now.